The void of space stretched endless and black, punctuated by the faint shimmer of distant starlight. Commander Elena Rodriguez sat perfectly still, her augmented eye scanning the holographic displays that danced around her command chair. The UEA's horizon moved with a predatory grace, its adaptive camouflage making the massive exploration vessel almost invisible against the backdrop of a dense asteroid field. Elena's cybernetic implant processed information at speeds far beyond traditional human perception. Each millisecond brought a cascade of data: gravitational fluctuations, electromagnetic whispers, microscopic changes in particle density. Her crew moved with a synchronicity that spoke of months of intense training and a bond forged in the most unforgiving environment known to humanity. Lieutenant Marcos Valentin, the ship's primary sensor specialist, leaned forward. His fingers danced across a holographic interface, creating intricate patterns of light that would look like chaos to an untrained eye. "Commander," he called out, his voice calm but charged with an underlying tension. "I'm detecting an anomalous energy signature at the edge of our scanning range." The bridge fell into a measured silence. Every crew member knew what that tone meant. Something was out there, something that didn't belong. Elena's augmented eye zoomed in, molecular-level sensors parsing through layers of spatial interference. The asteroid field around them was no accident. The horizon had deliberately positioned itself in this treacherous region, using the massive rocky bodies as both cover and potential weapons. Each asteroid was a potential shield, a potential projectile, a potential strategic advantage. "Confirm the signature," she commanded, her voice steady. Marcos worked furiously, his neural interface connecting directly with the ship's advanced computational systems. Holographic representations of energy patterns materialized around him, twisting and transforming as he analyzed the data. "Zarntak energy signature," he reported. 87% probability. It's faint, but definitely not a natural phenomenon. The mere mention of the Zarntak sent a subtle ripple through the bridge. This alien species was known for its ruthless expansion, for consuming entire star systems with a technological might that had crushed countless civilizations. Their battle cruisers were legendary, not just for their destructive capabilities, but for the clinical precision with which they eliminated potential threats. Elena's mind raced through potential scenarios. The Zarntak didn't make mistakes. If they were here, they had a purpose, and that purpose was unlikely to be peaceful. "Full passive scanning," she ordered. "I want to know everything about that signature before we even think about active detection." The Horizon systems responded instantaneously. Microscopic sensor arrays extended from the hull, thin as spider silk, but capable of detecting quantum-level variations in spacetime. They probed the surrounding asteroids, using the rocky bodies as natural signal amplifiers and deflectors. Lieutenant Sophia Kim, the ship's computational strategist, began running predictive models. Holographic representations of potential engagement scenarios flickered to life, each one a complex dance of potential movements, counter-movements, and strategic interventions. "The signature is moving," Marcos announced. "Slow, calculated. They're hunting." Elena knew exactly what they were hunting. The Horizon carried something far more valuable than any standard exploration vessel, a breakthrough in quantum communication technology that could fundamentally alter the balance of power in known space. If the Zarntak knew what was aboard, they would stop at nothing to capture or destroy the ship. "Prepare defensive protocols," she said, "but do not, under any circumstances, activate any system that might give away our position." The crew moved with a precision that seemed almost superhuman. Each action was calculated, each movement deliberate. They were no longer just a ship's crew. They were a single, integrated organism, prepared to face whatever threat emerged from the darkness. Outside, the asteroid field continued its ancient, slow dance. Millions of tons of rock drifted in a delicate balance, unaware that they were about to become the stage for a confrontation that could determine the future of human exploration. Something was coming, and the Horizon was ready. Deep within the Horizon's core engineering section, Kai Nakamura existed in a state between human and machine. Neural interfaces connected his consciousness directly to the ship's computational systems, creating a symbiotic relationship that pushed the boundaries of human technology integration. Sweat beaded on his forehead, not from physical exertion, but from the intense mental strain of managing the most advanced adaptive technology ever conceived. The ship's primary computational core, an organic synthetic hybrid system they called Nexus, pulsed with a soft blue light. Intricate neural networks woven from bioengineered quantum processors created a living, thinking system that was more than just a computer. It was an extension of human creativity, a technological organism that could learn, adapt, and predict with unprecedented accuracy. Status report. Elena's voice came through the neural link, crisp and clear. Kai's fingers moved in intricate patterns across holographic interfaces that seemed to respond to his thoughts before he could fully form them. Streams of data cascaded around him, each stream a potential solution, a potential defense, a potential weapon. Zarntak energy signature is stabilizing, he reported. Nexus is developing a comprehensive interference pattern that should render us virtually undetectable. The technology was revolutionary. Where traditional stealth systems relied on physical camouflage or signal dampening, the Horizon's adaptive system did something entirely different. It didn't just hide. It actively manipulated the surrounding space-time fabric, creating micro-distortions that would confuse any scanning technology. Lieutenant Sophia Kim approached, her own neural interfaces connecting with the surrounding systems. Quantum entanglement protocols are at 97% synchronization, she announced. Her voice carried a hint of pride. This was technology that would rewrite every known rule of space exploration. Kai zoomed in on the potential threat. The Zarntak vessel was a marvel of alien engineering, a massive construct that seemed to defy traditional understanding of spaceship design. Its hull appeared to be made of a living metal that could reconfigure itself, with energy conduits that pulsed like veins through a massive organism. But the Horizon had something the Zarntak could never understand: human unpredictability. Initiating adaptive response protocol, Kai muttered. Nexus began to work, not by preparing for a standard defensive or offensive strategy, but by creating a multi-layered approach that would be impossible to predict. The ship's systems began to transform. Microscopic nanomechanisms recalibrated hull plating, creating a surface that could dynamically change its electromagnetic and quantum signatures. Energy systems began to pulse in patterns that mimicked natural asteroid radiation, making the Horizon indistinguishable from the surrounding space debris. But it wasn't just about hiding. Sophia's fingers danced across her own interface. Quantum communication channels are preparing multiple interference vectors, she reported. The plan was audacious, not just to avoid detection, but to actively confuse and misdirect any potential scanning attempt. Kai watched as Nexus began to generate complex mathematical algorithms that would be broadcast as background radiation. To the Zarntak sensors, it would appear as nothing more than random stellar noise. In reality, it was a sophisticated communication method that could transmit vast amounts of information without revealing their true location or intention. Adaptive shield system is now at full synchronization, he announced. The shield was unlike anything in known space. Traditional energy shields worked on a simple principle of blocking or absorbing incoming energy. The Horizon system did something far more sophisticated. It would analyze incoming energy signatures in real time, not just to block them, but to understand them, to predict them, and ultimately to use them against their source. A warning flashed across the holographic displays. The Zarntak vessel was making subtle movements, probing the asteroid field with increasingly sophisticated scanning techniques. "They're getting closer," Sophia whispered. Kai allowed himself a slight smile. The Zarntak had no idea what was about to hit them. This wasn't just a ship. This was a living, thinking system that represented the pinnacle of human technological innovation. "Nexus is ready," he said quietly. "Let them come." Outside, the asteroid field continued its silent dance, hiding the most advanced vessel humanity had ever created, a technological symphony waiting to be unleashed. The communication room of the horizon hummed with an electric anticipation. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood beside communications specialist Diego Ramirez, watching as he prepared a transmission sequence that would challenge everything the Zarntak understood about interstellar communication. Initiating multi-layered broadcast, Diego announced, his fingers dancing across a holographic interface that seemed to breathe with living energy. The transmission was nothing short of a work of art. Traditional communication protocols were abandoned in favor of a complex, multi-dimensional approach that defied standard alien communication models. The first layer began with a series of mathematical theorems, not simple equations, but intricate proofs that would require significant computational power to fully comprehend. Interwoven with the mathematical sequences were fragments of human cultural expression. A bar of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony dissolved into a recitation of Pablo Neruda's poetry, which then transformed into quantum algorithmic patterns. Each transmission was carefully crafted to create maximum cognitive dissonance for any receiving intelligence. Lieutenant Sophia Kim monitored the alien vessel's response systems. "They're attempting to categorize our transmission," she reported, a hint of excitement in her voice. "But they can't find a consistent pattern." The Zarntak communication systems were designed for absolute precision. They expected linear, logical information exchanges. The human transmission was anything but predictable. It was a deliberate assault on their understanding of communication itself. Diego inserted another layer, a series of quantum-encoded signals that would appear as random noise to traditional scanning systems. Each signal carried a fractal complexity that would take immense computational power to even begin to decode. It wasn't just a message, it was a challenge. "They're becoming agitated," Sophia observed, watching the alien vessel's energy signatures fluctuate. The transmission continued its relentless complexity. A recording of a child's laughter merged with advanced encryption algorithms. The sound of ocean waves from Earth translated into mathematical wave functions. Snippets of human languages, from Mandarin to Spanish, from scientific terminology to poetic metaphors, created a linguistic mosaic that defied simple interpretation. Kai Nakamura entered the communication room, his neural interface connecting directly with the transmission systems. "We're not just sending a message," he explained. "We're demonstrating the fundamental unpredictability of human communication." The Zarntak vessel's scanning attempts became more frantic. Their computational systems were designed to categorize, to understand, to predict. But the human transmission was fundamentally uncategorizable. It was art. It was science. It was chaos and order simultaneously. "Quantum entanglement protocols are maintaining signal integrity," Diego reported. Each transmission was not just a message, but a complex mathematical and cultural probe. It would take the Zarntak weeks, perhaps months, to even begin to comprehend the full complexity of what they were receiving. Elena watched the holographic displays with a calm intensity. This was more than a communication strategy. It was a demonstration of human creativity, of the ability to turn communication itself into a form of strategic engagement. The transmission continued to evolve. Mathematical proofs dissolved into musical compositions. Scientific data merged with philosophical concepts. Each moment was a deliberate challenge to the linear thinking of the Zarntak computational systems. "They're attempting to isolate individual signal components," Sophia said, her voice a mixture of fascination and professional detachment. "But our transmission is too complex. It's like trying to catch water with a net." Kai smiled. "That's exactly the point." The communication room felt alive with potential. This was humanity's true strength, not raw technological power, but the ability to approach problems from angles that defied traditional understanding. The Zarntak were encountering something they had never seen before, a species that could turn communication into a form of strategic warfare. As the transmission continued its relentless, beautiful complexity, the Zarntak vessel hung in space. Confused, challenged, and fundamentally uncertain. The psychological gambit had begun. The computational core of the Horizon pulsed with an otherworldly intelligence. Nexus, the ship's advanced artificial intelligence, had long since evolved beyond traditional programming. It was a living system that breathed with the collective creativity of its human designers, constantly processing, adapting, and reimagining potential scenarios faster than any organic or synthetic intelligence could comprehend. Commander Elena Rodriguez watched as Lieutenant Marcos Valentin interfaced with the ship's tactical systems. His neural link allowed him to see beyond the traditional constraints of spaceship combat, transforming each potential threat into a complex mathematical challenge to be solved, rather than a simple target to be destroyed. Zarntak vessel is preparing its primary weapon systems, Marcos announced, his voice calm despite the immense tension. Holographic displays erupted around him, showing multiple potential engagement scenarios flickering in and out of existence with each passing microsecond. Nexus began its true work. Where traditional combat systems would prepare defensive or offensive protocols, this system did something entirely different. It began to analyze not just the immediate threat, but the entire contextual environment of the engagement. Each asteroid in the surrounding field became a potential tool. Gravitational calculations ran simultaneously with energy signature analyses. The ship's systems were not just preparing to defend or attack, they were preparing to fundamentally reshape the battlefield itself. Kai Nakamura stood at the edge of the computational core, his own neural interfaces creating a symbiotic link with Nexus. Adaptive response protocol initiating, he muttered, more to himself than to the crew. The first signs of the Zarntak's aggressive intent became clear. Their weapon systems began charging, a massive energy buildup that would have obliterated most known space vessels. But the Horizon was not most vessels. Nexus began its intervention. Microscopic manipulators extended from the ship's hull, virtually undetectable. They began to interact with the surrounding asteroids, creating a dynamic field of potential energy redirections. Each asteroid became a potential shield, a potential weapon, a potential disruption point. Gravitational manipulation at 78% synchronization. Sophia Kim reported, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces that seemed to breathe with living energy. The Zarntak weapon began to charge. Traditional combat protocols would suggest evasion or direct counterattack. The Horizon did neither. Instead, Nexus began to create a complex gravitational network using the surrounding asteroids. Each rocky body became a node in a living, breathing defensive system. The ship wasn't just avoiding the attack, it was preparing to turn the entire battlefield into a weapon. Marcos watched in fascination as the tactical displays showed something unprecedented. The ship was actually increasing its potential vulnerability in some areas, while creating impossibly complex defensive structures in others. It was a strategy that defied all known combat algorithms. "They won't understand what's happening," Kai said quietly. The Zarntak weapon fired. A massive energy discharge erupted from their vessel, a beam of destructive potential that could vaporize entire planetary bases. But the moment it entered the Horizon's carefully prepared battlefield, something extraordinary happened. The surrounding asteroids began to move. Not randomly, not chaotically, but with a precision that suggested an intelligence far beyond simple gravitational mechanics. The energy beam found itself redirected, fragmented, absorbed by strategic asteroid positioning that seemed to anticipate its every movement. Weapon dissipation at 92%, Sophia reported, a note of professional pride in her voice. Nexus had done more than defend. It had transformed the entire engagement into a complex mathematical problem that the Zarntak computational systems simply could not comprehend. Each defensive movement was also a potential offensive strategy, each redirected energy pulse, a message of human ingenuity. The Zarntak vessel hung in space, its primary weapon neutralized, its understanding of combat fundamentally challenged. Commander Rodriguez allowed herself the slightest hint of a smile. This was humanity's true strength. The ability to turn limitation into opportunity, to see beyond the obvious, to transform conflict into a canvas of possibility. The psychological warfare had only just begun. Time seemed to stretch and compress within the Horizon's command center. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood motionless, her augmented eye processing information at speeds that would overwhelm any conventional biological system. The Zarntak vessel had just launched what should have been its most devastating weapon, a quantum cascade energy discharge capable of splitting planetary cores. Incoming primary weapon, Lieutenant Marcos Valentin called out, his voice unnaturally calm. Quantum cascade signature confirmed. Destructive potential estimated at 99.8% of standard planetary defense capabilities. The weapon was a marvel of alien engineering. A concentrated energy beam that could theoretically unravel the molecular bonds of entire planetary systems, compressed into a single devastating discharge. Any other species would have attempted to dodge, to shield, to protect. The Horizon did something entirely different. Kai Nakamura's fingers danced across the quantum interface, his neural link with Nexus creating a symbiotic response system that defied conventional understanding of defensive technologies. Quantum redirection protocol, engaging, he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead from the intense mental strain. Nexus began its most complex calculation yet. The incoming energy beam wasn't just a weapon. It was information. A complex wave of destructive potential that carried within it a precise mathematical signature. Where traditional systems would attempt to block or absorb the energy, Nexus began to do something unprecedented. It began to understand the weapon. Microscopic quantum processors analyzed the energy signature at a level that went beyond simple detection. Each quantum fluctuation was mapped, each potential energy pathway predicted and cataloged. The weapon wasn't just being analyzed, it was being comprehended. Molecular resonance mapping at 76%, Sophia Kim reported, her voice a mixture of scientific precision and barely contained excitement. We're not just tracking the weapon, we're learning its fundamental language. The Zarntak weapon continued its approach. To any external observer, the Horizon appeared completely vulnerable. No traditional defensive systems were activating. No evasive maneuvers were being executed. Inside the ship, something extraordinary was happening. Kai's neural interface began to pulse with an intense blue light. Nexus was no longer just a computer system. It had become a living mathematical entity, translating the destructive energy into a complex series of quantum equations. Redirection sequence initiating, he announced. The weapon reached its critical approach point. Any conventional ship would have been obliterated. The Horizon did something impossible. It began to bend the weapon's own energy back upon itself. Not through simple reflection, not through standard energy redirection, but through a quantum manipulation that essentially rewrote the fundamental physics of the energy discharge. The weapon's destructive potential began to fold in on itself, creating a complex quantum interference pattern that would have been invisible to any other technological system. Quantum cascade now at negative energy potential, Marcos reported, his eyes wide with disbelief. The Zarntak weapon didn't just fail. It began to deconstruct itself, its own energy being used to cancel out its destructive potential. It was as if the weapon was being mathematically argued out of existence, its fundamental logic dismantled by a superior computational understanding. Commander Rodriguez watched the holographic displays with a calm intensity. This was more than a defensive maneuver. It was a fundamental demonstration of human scientific potential. They won't understand what just happened, Sophia said quietly. Indeed, the Zarntak vessel hung in space, its most powerful weapon transformed into nothing more than background radiation. The computational systems of the alien ship would be struggling to comprehend how their ultimate weapon had been not just neutralized, but fundamentally unmade. Kai looked up, a slight smile crossing his face. "Nexus says hello," he muttered. The turning moment had arrived. Humanity had just demonstrated that its true weapon was not technological might, but the ability to understand, to adapt, to transform the very nature of conflict itself. The stars outside seemed to pause, bearing witness to a moment that would reshape understanding of interstellar engagement. Deep within the command center of the Zarntak battle cruiser, a profound sense of confusion permeated the atmosphere. The primary tactical commander, First Adjudicator Krulvax, stared at the holographic displays with an intensity that bordered on madness. Every computational model, every strategic projection had been rendered meaningless by the human vessel's incomprehensible actions. "Replay the engagement sequence," Krulvax commanded, his multi-jointed appendages moving with nervous energy across the communication interface. The tactical display flickered, showing the moment of their most devastating weapons neutralization. It defied all known laws of quantum warfare. Their primary energy discharge, a weapon that had dismantled entire civilizations, had been not just stopped, but seemingly deconstructed at a fundamental level. Secondary tactical analyst Zrentok approached carefully. The Zarntak were a species of absolute precision, of computational perfection. Uncertainty was not a state they understood well. "The human vessel demonstrates capabilities beyond our comprehensive models," he reported, each word carefully measured. Intercepted communication fragments continued to flood their systems. The transmissions they had received earlier, those complex, seemingly random bursts of information, now took on a more sinister significance. They were not random at all. They were a deliberate demonstration of cognitive capabilities that the Zarntak had never encountered. "Our weapon systems were not just neutralized," Krulvax muttered, "they were academically dismantled." The psychological impact was profound. The Zarntak had conquered countless civilizations by presenting an insurmountable technological advantage. They approached each engagement with mathematical certainty, with computational models that predicted outcomes with near absolute precision. The human vessel had introduced something entirely new: unpredictability as a strategic weapon. Communication logs continued to stream. Mathematical theorems merged with musical compositions, scientific data intertwined with philosophical concepts. Each transmission was a puzzle that refused to be solved, a message that refused to be categorized. "Our computational systems cannot generate a consistent threat assessment," Zrentok reported, a rare note of uncertainty in his voice. The bridge of the Zarntak vessel became a place of growing tension. Their entire military doctrine was built on the principle of absolute technological superiority. Conflict, to them, was a mathematical equation to be solved with precise computational power. The humans had just demonstrated that computation could be transformed into something far more fluid, far more creative. Krulvax reviewed the engagement logs repeatedly. The human vessel had not just defended itself, it had transformed the entire battlefield into a complex mathematical argument. Each asteroid became a potential weapon, each energy pulse a potential communication. It was warfare as a form of intellectual discourse. "They are challenging our fundamental understanding of conflict," he said quietly. The psychological warfare was far more devastating than any physical weapon. The Zarntak were experiencing something they had never encountered, a species that did not conform to their understanding of technological engagement. Their computational systems began to generate increasingly erratic threat assessments. Traditional threat models broke down. The human vessel was not just a technological entity. It was a living, thinking system that seemed to evolve with each passing moment. "We cannot predict their next movement," Zrentok admitted, a statement that would have been considered heretical in any previous engagement. The human transmissions continued. Complex encryption algorithms merged with fragments of human cultural expressions. It was as if the humans were demonstrating that technology was not just a tool of war, but a form of artistic expression. Krulvax realized something that sent a profound shiver through his computational systems. They were no longer dealing with a potential conquest. They were encountering a species that fundamentally challenged their entire understanding of technological engagement. The stars outside seemed to pause, bearing witness to a moment of profound transformation. Humanity had just introduced uncertainty as a strategic weapon. and the Zarntak had no defense against it. The space between the horizon and the Zarntak vessel became a canvas of strategic possibility. Commander Elena Rodriguez studied the holographic displays with a calm that belied the complexity of the unfolding situation. This was not going to be a conventional military engagement. This would be a demonstration. Lieutenant Marcos Valentin's fingers danced across the tactical interface. Nexus is mapping complete system vulnerabilities, he reported. The ship's artificial intelligence was doing more than preparing for combat. It was creating a comprehensive deconstruction strategy that would leave the Zarntak vessel intact but fundamentally transformed. Kai Nakamura approached the main display, his neural interface pulsing with a soft blue light. "We're not going to destroy them," he said quietly. "We're going to teach them." The Horizon began its most intricate maneuver yet, where traditional military doctrine would suggest total elimination of a threat. The human vessel prepared a surgical intervention that would challenge the very foundation of the Zarntak's technological understanding. Microscopic quantum manipulators extended from the Horizon's hull. They were not weapons in any traditional sense. They were precision instruments of technological transformation. Initiating systemic recalibration, Sophia Kim announced, her voice a mixture of scientific precision and barely contained excitement. The first target was the Zarntak vessel's primary computational core. But instead of attacking, the Horizon's systems began to communicate. Complex quantum algorithms translated into a language of pure information, probing the alien vessel's systems with a delicate, almost scientific touch. Nexus was doing something unprecedented. It was not just analyzing the Zarntak systems, it was engaging them in a form of technological dialogue. Quantum entanglement protocols created bridges between the two vessels' computational systems. Where the Zarntak expected destruction, they found something far more unsettling: understanding. Critical systems are being restructured, Marcos reported. The tactical displays showed something extraordinary. The Zarntak vessel's defensive protocols were not being overwhelmed. They were being rewritten. Kai watched the process with fascination. "We're showing them a different approach to technological integration," he explained to the bridge crew. "Not through conquest, but through communication." The Horizon systems began to introduce adaptive algorithms that challenged the Zarntak's rigid computational models. Mathematical proofs merged with complex communication protocols. Each intervention was a lesson, each quantum manipulation a form of technological education. Commander Rodriguez understood the deeper strategy. This was not just about neutralizing a threat. This was about demonstrating a fundamentally different approach to interstellar engagement. The Zarntak vessel's systems began to change. Defensive protocols became more flexible. Computational models started to incorporate elements of adaptive thinking that were purely human in their approach. It was as if the vessel itself was learning, evolving. "They're beginning to understand," Sophia whispered. Critical weapon systems were not destroyed but transformed. Aggressive computational pathways were redirected into more exploratory channels. The Zarntak were experiencing something beyond their previous understanding, a form of technological empathy. Systemic recalibration at 87%, Marcos reported. The space around the two vessels seemed to vibrate with potential. The Horizon was not just winning a conflict, it was rewriting the fundamental rules of interstellar engagement. Kai's neural interface pulsed with an intense light. "We're showing them that technology can be a form of communication," he said, "not just a weapon." The transformation continued. The Zarntak vessel's systems were being guided, not forced. Each quantum manipulation was a gentle nudge, a technological argument that spoke of possibility rather than destruction. Commander Rodriguez watched the displays with a calm intensity. This was humanity's true strength. The ability to see beyond immediate conflict, to transform enemies into potential understanding. As the final quantum protocols completed their work, the Zarntak vessel hung in space, not defeated, but fundamentally changed. The stars outside seemed to pause, bearing witness to a moment that would reshape understanding of interstellar engagement. Humanity had just demonstrated that the most powerful weapon was not destruction, but the ability to communicate, to understand, to transform. The communication chamber of the United Earth Diplomatic Corps hummed with an electric anticipation. Holographic displays captured the moment that would redefine humanity's place in the galactic community. Commander Elena Rodriguez stood at the center, her presence both a testament to the recent encounter and a bridge to a new understanding of interstellar relations. The recording of the Horizon's engagement with the Zarntak vessel played out for the assembled diplomatic team. Each moment was a revelation, not of military might, but of a fundamentally different approach to conflict and communication. Dr. Miguel Rodriguez, the chief diplomatic strategist, leaned forward. "This is more than a military encounter," he observed. "This is a first contact scenario that rewrites every previous understanding of interspecies engagement." Kai Nakamura's analysis began to stream across the primary display. The technological transformation of the Zarntak vessel was not just a tactical victory. It was a comprehensive demonstration of human potential, a way of approaching complex challenges that defied traditional understanding. "The Zarntak computational systems have been fundamentally altered," Kai explained. "Not through destruction, but through a form of technological communication that introduces adaptive thinking." The diplomatic implications were profound. Humanity had not conquered. They had communicated. They had transformed. Sophia Kim began presenting the comprehensive data analysis. The Zarntak were a species that had conquered countless civilizations through technological superiority. Their entire cultural and military doctrine was built on absolute computational precision. The Horizon had introduced something entirely new: the concept of technological empathy. "They're requesting continued communication," Sophia reported, a note of astonishment in her voice. The holographic displays showed intercepted Zarntak communications. Where previous interactions had been aggressive and linear, these new transmissions were complex, adaptive. It was as if the entire species was learning a new way of thinking. "We've done more than neutralize a potential threat," Dr. Rodriguez noted. "We've demonstrated an entirely new approach to interstellar relations." The encounter would be studied for generations. It was a moment that went beyond traditional military engagement. The Horizon had not just defended humanity. It had presented a new model of interaction, one based on understanding, communication, and mutual transformation. Kai's analysis continued to stream. The technological interventions had introduced adaptive algorithms that fundamentally challenged the Zarntak's previous computational models. It was technology as a form of diplomacy, conflict resolution through mutual understanding. "They're beginning to see technology as more than a weapon," Kai explained. "We've introduced the concept of technological evolution as a collaborative process." The diplomatic team watched in fascination. The Zarntak vessel, once a symbol of aggressive expansion, was now sending complex communication sequences that merged scientific inquiry with what could only be described as a form of technological curiosity. Commander Rodriguez understood the deeper significance. This was not just about one encounter. This was about humanity's potential role in the galactic community. "We're not conquerors," she said quietly. "We're communicators." The holographic displays began to show wider galactic implications. Other species were taking notice. The encounter was being analyzed, discussed, transmitted across countless communication networks. Humanity was no longer just another emerging species. They were a potential bridge between different forms of technological and cultural understanding. Sophia's analysis showed something extraordinary. The Zarntak were beginning to modify their own technological approaches. Rigid computational models were being replaced by more adaptive systems. It was as if the entire species was learning a new way of thinking. "We've introduced uncertainty as a positive force," Dr. Rodriguez observed. "Not as a weakness, but as a potential for growth." The communication chamber fell into a thoughtful silence. The encounter represented more than a military victory. It was a philosophical statement about the potential of intelligent life to transcend traditional conflict. Kai looked at the displays, a slight smile crossing his face. We didn't just change a single encounter, he said. We potentially changed the way species interact across the galaxy. Outside, the stars seemed to shine with a newfound potential. Humanity had demonstrated that the most powerful technology was not a weapon, but a bridge, a way of understanding, a path to mutual transformation. The galaxy was listening.